Every bride imagined the moment differently. Some dreamed about the flowers. Others remembered the music. Evelyn Carter would remember the silence. It arrived like a living thing. One heartbeat, the cathedral overflowed with applause, laughter, and the soft melody of a string quartet drifting beneath stained glass windows. The next, everything stopped. The violinist lowered her bow. Champagne glasses froze halfway to waiting lips. Even the minister looked toward the massive oak doors, as though the building itself had inhaled. Boom! The doors swung open with enough force to shake centuries-old stone. Cold rain rushed inside. Wind scattered white rose petals across the marble floor. Outside, a convoy of matte black SUVs stretched along the cathedral steps, engines rumbling beneath a gray Chicago sky. No one moved. Nearly 50 men in immaculate black suits stepped into formation. Umbrellas remained folded despite the downpour. Rain soaked their jackets without anyone seeming to notice. Each man wore an earpiece. Each stood perfectly still. Each carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who expected the world to move around him. Then he appeared. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an impeccably tailored black Italian suit, already darkened by rain. His black hair clung slightly to his forehead, a single drop of water tracing the sharp line of his jaw before disappearing beneath his collar. His face betrayed nothing. No anger, no urgency, no triumph, only calm. The kind of calm found in hurricanes. His gray eyes lifted, straight to Evelyn. Not the groom, not the minister, only her. A strange chill crept beneath her skin. She had never seen him before, yet something inside her whispered she had been walking toward this moment for years. Someone near the front pew gasped, "Oh my God." Another voice barely breathed his name. De Luca. Fear rippled through the congregation like electricity. Phones quietly disappeared beneath tables. Bodyguards belonging to Damien Ashford instinctively reached beneath their jackets. None drew their weapons, not because they didn't want to, because they knew who stood before them. Adriano De Luca, the man newspapers called a myth, governments denied existed, crime families feared more than death itself. He began walking. Each polished shoe echoed against marble, measured, unhurried, as though interrupting billion-dollar weddings happened every afternoon. Evelyn couldn't breathe. Her fingers tightened around the bouquet until white roses bent beneath the pressure. Beside her, Damien leaned closer with a reassuring smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Ignore him," he whispered. "Security will handle this." Yet his voice sounded strained, almost frightened. She had never heard fear from Damien. Never. Adriano stopped only a few feet away. Rainwater dripped quietly onto the polished floor. For several endless seconds, no one spoke. The Mafia Boss reached inside his coat. Half the cathedral flinched. Damien's guards lifted their hands. Instead of a weapon, Adriano slowly removed an aged leather envelope. Its corners had yellowed with time. Dark stains covered one edge. Old blood. Without breaking eye contact, he unfolded a brittle document. His deep voice filled the cathedral. Calm, controlled, almost gentle. Evelyn Carter. She swallowed. "Yes, I apologize for the timing." His Italian accent was subtle, refined. "But this cannot wait. He turned the document toward her. I've come to collect what your father entrusted to me. The words struck the room harder than gunfire. Confused whispers erupted from every pew. Damien laughed, too loudly. This is absurd. He stepped between them. My fiancé doesn't know you. Adriano barely acknowledged him. His eyes never left Evelyn. No, she doesn't. His gaze softened almost imperceptibly. But I knew her before she was born. The cathedral fell silent again. Evelyn stared at the weathered paper. A faded signature. Her father's name. Richard Carter. Below it, today's date, 25 years earlier. Her heartbeat stumbled. No, her voice barely emerged. That's impossible. Adriano extended the document. You deserve to read it yourself. Her trembling fingers reached forward, but Damien snatched the contract first. His smile disappeared as his eyes scanned the page. Color drained from his face. He flipped to another page, then another. His breathing changed. What? His voice cracked. What is this? Adriano answered without emotion. A promise. Damien looked up. You're lying. No. You forged it. No. My lawyers already verified it. Silence. The billionaire's confidence vanished so quickly it almost frightened Evelyn more than Adriano's arrival. She had watched Damien negotiate billion-dollar mergers without blinking. Now his hands shook. Adriano finally looked at him. Only then, only for a second. You knew this day might come. Damien's expression hardened. I destroyed every copy. You missed one. The Mafia Boss calmly took another step forward. Evelyn deserves the truth. Damien suddenly grabbed Evelyn's wrist. We're leaving. The grip was harder than she had ever felt. Pain flashed through her hand. She looked at him, startled. Damien. His smile returned. Forced. Artificial. He's manipulating you. We're done here. Adriano's voice remained quiet. Release her. Damien ignored him. Security. No one moved. He shouted louder. I said move. Still, nothing. His own bodyguards stared at the floor. No one wanted to become the first man to point a weapon at Adriano De Luca. Damien's breathing became ragged. You don't own her. For the first time, real emotion crossed Adriano's face. Not anger. Something older. Something heavier. Regret. I never wanted to. Evelyn blinked. The words didn't fit the monster everyone feared. He looked back at her, gray eyes, holding an exhaustion that seemed decades old. Your father never sold you. Her world stopped. He begged me. Adriano's voice lowered. To save you. And, somewhere outside, thunder rolled across the Chicago skyline. Thunder rolled above the cathedral like distant artillery. For several endless seconds, no one breathed. Evelyn stood between two men who represented two completely different worlds. One wore the polished smile of America's favorite billionaire. The other carried the silence of a man every criminal organization feared. Yet, only one of them looked afraid. Damien Ashford. His grip around Evelyn's wrist tightened just enough to make her wince. Evelyn. His voice was calm again. Too calm. Don't listen to him. We're leaving. She stared at him, confused. Why are you scared? His eyes widened, almost imperceptibly. I'm protecting you. Before she could answer, Adriano spoke. No. His voice remained quiet. You're protecting yourself. Damien laughed sharply. From what? The truth. The words echoed through the cathedral. Guests exchanged nervous glances. Someone near the back quietly slipped toward the exit. Another guest secretly began recording with a phone until one of Adriano's men simply looked in his direction. The phone disappeared. No threats, no violence, only reputation. Adriano slowly held out the weathered contract. Evelyn, this belongs to you. She hesitated. Everything about the man terrified her. The blood staining one sleeve of his tailored suit, the rain dripping from his hair, the emotionless bodyguards surrounding the entrance. Yet his eyes, they never wandered, never judged, never consumed her the way Damien's often did. They watched her, as though waiting for permission. She finally reached forward. This time, Damien tried to stop her. Adriano caught his wrist before he could. The movement happened so quickly, almost no one saw it. 1 second, Damien's hand moved. The next, Adriano held it effortlessly. His expression never changed. If you touch her again, without her consent, he looked directly into Damien's eyes. I'll forget we're standing in a church. Silence. Pure silence. Damien slowly pulled his hand away. For the first time since Evelyn had known him, he obeyed someone. Her fingers unfolded the brittle paper. The handwriting belonged to her father. She recognized every uneven stroke. The same handwriting that had once signed birthday cards. The same handwriting that had stopped forever when she was 14. Her vision blurred. The first paragraph read, "If this document is ever opened, then I have failed to keep my daughter safe." Her breath caught. The cathedral disappeared around her. There was only ink. Only her father's voice inside her mind. Adriano remained perfectly still. He had imagined this moment thousands of times over 25 years. None of those imagined versions had prepared him for the tears gathering in Evelyn's eyes. Richard Carter had made him promise one thing. Never let her believe she had been traded. Never let her think she was a debt. She was never collateral. She was the only innocent soul trapped inside a war she never chose. Evelyn continued reading. Adriano, if you're reading this, then I couldn't stop them. Her hands began shaking. They'll come for my daughter. Not because of money, because of what I discovered. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She looked up. What does this mean? Adriano answered quietly. It means your father died because he refused to sell children. The words struck harder than thunder. Damien stepped forward. Enough. She's grieving. Adriano ignored him. Richard Carter uncovered an international trafficking network. He was going to expose everyone involved. Evelyn frowned. My father was an architect. He designed ports. Adriano nodded. And those ports became transportation routes. Her knees weakened. He found shipping manifests. Hidden containers. Children. The bouquet slipped from her hands. White roses scattered across the marble floor. Memories she had buried suddenly returned. Her father locking every door one night, looking through the curtains, changing their route to school, teaching her never to tell strangers her name. She had believed he was paranoid. Now, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Damien interrupted. She's in shock. You're manipulating her. Adriano finally looked toward him. No, I've spent 25 years trying not to. Damien smiled again. A polished billionaire smile. Interesting. Then, explain something. If Richard trusted you so much, Why didn't you raise her? A flicker crossed Adriano's face. Pine. Small. Almost invisible. Because he asked me not to. Evelyn stared between them. Nothing made sense. You knew where I lived? Adriano answered. Yes. You watched me? Yes. For 25 years? Another pause. Yes. Fear rose inside her. So I've been. His answer came before she finished. Protected. She stepped backward. That's not protection. That's surveillance. He accepted the accusation without defending himself. I know. You should hate me for it. I've hated myself enough for both of us. His honesty unsettled her more than any denial could have. A loud crack echoed outside. Everyone turned. One of the cathedral's stained glass windows exploded inward. Glass rained across the aisle. Someone screamed. Then came another shot. Gunfire. Chaos erupted instantly. Guests threw themselves beneath pews. The orchestra scattered. Damien's security rushed toward the entrance. Adriano moved only once, straight toward Evelyn. He caught her just before another round shattered the marble column beside where she had been standing. Down. His voice remained astonishingly calm. She instinctively obeyed. Another bullet struck the altar. Dust filled the cathedral. Adriano wrapped one arm around her shoulders, shielding her body with his own. She could smell rain, gunpowder, leather, and the faint scent of expensive cedar cologne beneath it all. He wasn't holding her possessively. He was covering every exposed angle. 3 more shots. Then silence. One of Adriano's men spoke into his earpiece. West rooftop. 2 shooters. Already handled. The word chilled Evelyn. She didn't ask what it meant. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. Adriano slowly lifted his head. Are you hurt? She blinked. No. You? A thin line of blood trickled down his temple. He hadn't even noticed. It's nothing. His attention immediately returned to scanning every entrance, every balcony, every window, like a predator expecting another attack. Damien emerged from behind a marble pillar, his expensive tuxedo now covered in dust. Evelyn. He hurried toward her. Before he reached her, Adriano stepped between them. No. Damien glared. I'm her fiancé. Adriano's voice never rose. And yet, he glanced toward the shattered window. Someone just tried to kill her on your wedding day. The accusation lingered in the air. Damien looked genuinely offended. You think I arranged this? I think. Adriano replied evenly. Someone knew exactly where she would be. Police sirens wailed outside. Blue lights reflected across the rain-soaked stained glass. Guests began rushing toward the exits. News helicopters circled overhead. Within minutes, every major network in Chicago would report that America's most eligible billionaire had his wedding interrupted by the country's most feared mafia boss, and that gunfire had erupted inside the ceremony. Exactly the kind of public scandal someone wanted. Evelyn looked around the destroyed cathedral. Flowers crushed beneath fleeing feet, broken glass sparkling like ice. The wedding she had planned for over a year no longer existed. Neither did the life she thought she understood. She turned toward Adriano. Tell me one thing. He waited. If my father trusted you, why didn't you come sooner? For the first time since entering the cathedral, the great Adriano De Luca hesitated. His gray eyes darkened. Because his voice was barely above a whisper. I believed staying away was the only way to keep you alive. A deep explosion echoed somewhere outside. Not gunfire this time. A vehicle. Flames briefly illuminated the cathedral windows. One of Adriano's men rushed inside. Boss, the bride's limousine just exploded. Every face turned toward Evelyn. A cold realization settled over the room. Whoever had planned today's attack had never intended for the bride to leave the church alive. And someone, somewhere in the smoke beyond the cathedral, was already preparing to finish the job. The explosion shook the cathedral hard enough to rattle the stained glass windows that were still standing. Orange flames reflected across the marble floor. Smoke rolled past the entrance, where Evelyn's white limousine had been parked only moments before. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Adriano's expression changed. Not into panic, into calculation. His eyes swept across every exit, every balcony, every shadow. "They're not finished," he said quietly. One of his captains stepped forward. "Boss, perimeter secured." Adriano shook his head. "No." They wanted the explosion to draw everyone outside. His voice remained frighteningly calm. "The second team is waiting." Evelyn stared at him. "Second team?" Before he could answer, a burst of automatic gunfire erupted from across the street. The cathedral's front doors splintered. Guests screamed. Bodyguards pushed people toward cover. Marble columns shattered under the hail of bullets. Adriano didn't hesitate. He grabbed Evelyn by the waist and pulled her behind the altar, just as another volley ripped through the church. The impact knocked both of them to the floor. She landed against his chest. His arm instinctively wrapped around her head, shielding her from falling stone. For one suspended heartbeat, she heard nothing except his heartbeat. Steady, strong, completely controlled, as if chaos had become the rhythm of his life. Outside, engines roared. Black SUVs accelerated across the cathedral courtyard. Adriano's men answered the ambush with disciplined precision. No shouting, no panic, only short commands through hidden earpieces. Evelyn looked up. Blood was running down Adriano's forehead now. A shard of glass had cut his temple. "You've been hurt." He barely acknowledged it. "It'll heal." His attention never left the shattered doorway. She realized something that unsettled her. He hadn't asked whether he would survive, only whether she would. Damien crawled behind a marble pillar, his expensive tuxedo stained with dust and ash. "Evelyn." His voice cracked. "Come to me." She instinctively turned. Adriano caught her wrist. Not forcefully, just enough to stop her. His gray eyes met hers. "Look at him." She frowned. "What?" "Look." Damien wasn't looking at her. He wasn't watching the shooters. He wasn't helping the guests. His eyes kept darting toward his phone, waiting, almost expecting something. Adriano leaned closer. "So tell me, why does a man whose bride is under attack keep checking his messages?" A chill ran through Evelyn. She looked again. Damien immediately hid the phone behind his jacket. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Silence settled over the cathedral. Smoke drifted through broken windows. Sirens echoed somewhere in the distance. One of Adriano's men entered. "Boss, they're retreating. No prisoners." Adriano nodded once. They weren't supposed to survive. Minutes later, the remaining wedding guests were escorted through a secure, underground passage beneath the cathedral. The hidden tunnel connected to an abandoned monastery, built more than a century earlier. Evelyn followed silently. She no longer knew whom to trust. Everything she believed that morning had collapsed before noon. The billionaire she intended to marry looked like a stranger. The mafia boss she'd been taught to fear had just risked his life twice without asking for anything in return. Nothing made sense. Outside the tunnel waited another convoy of black SUVs, every engine already running. Adriano opened the rear door himself. "We're leaving." She didn't move. "You expect me to go with you?" "No." He looked directly into her eyes. "I expect you to choose." She glanced behind her. Damien was approaching quickly. Evelyn. His smile had returned. "We need to leave before the media gets here." Adriano remained silent. He never interrupted, never pressured her. For the first time all day, the decision belonged entirely to her. She looked from one man to the other. Then she noticed it. A faint streak of soot on Damien's cuff. Not unusual after the explosion, except embedded in the soot was blue industrial powder, the exact same color she'd seen on the shattered limousine moments earlier. Her stomach tightened. How had he gotten close enough to the car? Before the explosion, she slowly stepped backward, not toward Damien, toward Adriano. Damien's smile vanished. "Evel, what are you doing?" Her voice trembled. "I don't know who you are anymore." For the first time in years, Damien lost control. His face twisted with fury. "You think he's protecting you?" He pointed at Adriano. "He's a murderer." Adriano answered calmly. "Yes, I am." The admission stunned everyone. "I've killed men." "I'll answer for that one day." His eyes never left Evelyn. "But I have never lied to you." Damien laughed bitterly. "You've been watching her for 25 years. I have. You call that love?" Adriano's jaw tightened. "No, I call it a promise." Evelyn felt tears burn her eyes. Nobody had ever spoken about protecting her with such painful honesty. He wasn't pretending to be a hero. He wasn't asking to be forgiven. He simply carried the burden. Alone. For 25 years. The convoy pulled away from the cathedral, just as news helicopters filled the sky. Within an hour, every television screen in America showed the same images. A bride, a Mafia Boss, a burning limousine, and the headline that would ignite the country. Billionaire's wedding erupts into bloodshed. Their destination lay outside Chicago, a private estate hidden deep within an ancient forest. Stone walls, iron gates, century-old oak trees. The mansion looked less like a home and more like a fortress built to survive wars. Evelyn stepped inside cautiously. She expected luxury. She found silence. No extravagant party. No gold-plated excess. Only dark wood. Bookshelves. Fireplaces. Old paintings. The house felt lonely. Adriano removed his blood-stained jacket. Only then did she notice another wound. A bullet had grazed his shoulder. His white shirt beneath was soaked crimson. "You need a doctor." "I'm fine." "You are not fine." He almost smiled. "Almost. I've survived worse." She crossed the room before thinking. "Sit down." He raised one eyebrow. That wasn't a request. For several seconds, they simply looked at one another. Then, The most feared mafia boss in America quietly sat. His bodyguards exchanged confused glances. None of them had ever seen anyone give Adriano De Luca an order, much less watch him obey it. She carefully cleaned the wound. The room remained quiet except for rain tapping softly against tall windows. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. The silence itself carried something dangerous. Every time her fingertips brushed his skin, his breathing slowed, almost imperceptibly. Every time he looked into her eyes, she forgot why she should fear him. When she finished wrapping the bandage, she whispered, "Why me?" Adriano stared into the fire. "Because your father saved my soul." She frowned. "I don't understand." He looked at the flames for a long time before answering. "Years ago, I believed power was everything. Richard Carter reminded me that innocent people still existed. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, his daughter would never stand alone." His voice broke for the first time, only slightly. "I failed him once. I won't fail him again." Evelyn's heart ached. She suddenly understood. He wasn't obsessed with owning her. He was terrified of losing the last promise he'd ever made to an honorable man. Outside, rain continued to fall. Somewhere far beyond the mansion walls, enemies were already preparing their next move. Inside the quiet room, neither of them noticed how close they had become, or how impossible it would soon be to walk away, because the war that had stolen Evelyn's wedding was only beginning. The rain continued through the night. It drummed steadily against the towering windows of Adriano De Luca's secluded estate, turning the ancient forest surrounding the mansion into a sea of black silhouettes and silver mist. Evelyn hadn't slept. She stood alone on the second-floor balcony, wrapped in a wool blanket someone had quietly left outside her bedroom. The air smelled of rain and pine. Far below, armed guards patrolled the grounds with military precision. No raised voices, no unnecessary movement, only discipline. It was unlike anything she had imagined a mafia compound would be. There was no loud music, no drunken celebrations, no extravagant displays of wealth. Only silence, only vigilance, only the constant awareness that danger never slept. Behind her, the bedroom door opened softly. "You should be resting." Adriano's voice remained low, almost swallowed by the rain. Without turning, Evelyn asked, "Do you ever sleep?" A faint pause. "When I can." She looked over her shoulder. He had changed into a charcoal sweater and dark trousers, but the white bandage beneath his collar reminded her how close death had come only hours earlier. "You should still be in bed. So should you." For the first time since they had met, the corner of his mouth lifted ever so slightly. It wasn't quite a smile. It disappeared almost as quickly as it came. Before either of them could say another word, hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. One of Adriano's captains stopped outside the room. "Boss." Adriano immediately became unreadable again. "What happened?" "The accountant." "What about him?" "He didn't make it." Silence. Evelyn frowned. "Who?" Adriano looked toward the rain. "The man who kept Richard Carter's evidence." Her heartbeat quickened. "My father's evidence still exists?" "It did." The captain lowered his eyes. "We found him this morning. He was executed." A knot formed in Evelyn's stomach. "So whoever wants me dead is still searching." Adriano nodded once. "And they're getting desperate." 30 minutes later, Evelyn found herself seated inside an enormous library. Dark oak shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Thousands of books lined the walls. A fire crackled quietly. Adriano placed a leather folder on the table. This belonged to your father. Her hands hesitated before opening it. Inside were photographs, shipping containers, dockyards, private airfields, luxury yachts. Then came another photograph. Her father, standing beside a younger Adriano. Neither man smiled. Both looked exhausted. My father knew you long before I was born. He did. What were you to each other? Adriano answered honestly. Enemies. She blinked. What? We met on opposite sides. He folded his hands. Richard believed every criminal deserved justice. And you? I believed justice didn't exist. The room fell quiet. So what changed? Adriano looked toward the old photograph. He saved a little girl. Evelyn frowned. What girl? You. She stared at him. I was only 4. You don't remember. Adriano stood and walked toward the fireplace. There was an explosion. Her mind searched through fragments of memory. Smoke, searings, her father's arms carrying her through darkness. She had always believed it was a gas leak. It wasn't an accident. Adriano continued. A rival family planted explosives. They wanted Richard dead. He chose to save you first. And you? I carried both of you out. She froze. You were there? Yes. My father never told me. He couldn't. He promised your mother he'd never involve you in my world. A soft knock interrupted them. Another guard entered. Boss, the FBI has arrived. Evelyn looked up sharply. The FBI? They're outside the gates. How did they find us? Adriano's expression darkened. They didn't. Everyone in the room fell silent. They were told. His gaze slowly shifted toward the security monitors mounted on the wall. There is a leak. Minutes later, dozens of black SUVs rolled silently through the estate. From the upstairs window, Evelyn watched federal vehicles stop outside the iron gates. Agents in tactical gear spread across the road. Helicopters circled overhead. The peaceful isolation of the mansion vanished instantly. Inside the security room, digital maps illuminated every wall. One captain pointed toward the monitors. They're requesting entry. Another shook his head. Too many vehicles. Adriano stood perfectly still. What does your instinct say? The room waited. They're buying time. For who? Adriano's gray eyes narrowed. The people coming after Evelyn. Almost on cue, alarms erupted throughout the estate. Red lights flashed across every hallway. One of the surveillance screens went black. Then another. Then another. A guard rushed inside. Boss, the east fence has been breached. How many? We don't know. Electricity flickered. The lights dimmed. Outside, thunder exploded across the forest. Evelyn's pulse raced. They're here. Adriano calmly reached into a hidden cabinet. Instead of a rifle, he removed a bulletproof vest. He walked directly toward Evelyn. Without asking permission, he gently draped it over her shoulders. She looked at him. What about you? I already have one. She noticed he didn't. You're lying. I've become very good at it. It was the closest thing to humor she'd heard from him, yet his eyes remained deadly serious. Another explosion echoed somewhere beyond the trees. The mansion trembled. Glass shattered downstairs. Gunfire erupted. The attack had begun. Bodyguards flooded the corridors with disciplined precision. No panic, no shouting, only short commands. North entrance secure. Move Team 3. Protect the principal. Evelyn frowned. Principal? One guard answered instinctively. You, ma'am. She stared at him. Not the boss? The guard looked genuinely confused. The boss ordered that your safety comes before his. Adriano shot the man a warning glance. The guard immediately fell silent. But the damage had already been done. Evelyn looked back at Adriano. You gave that order? He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve. Yes. Why? His answer came quietly. Because I can replace every man in this house. His eyes met hers. I can't replace you. For just a second. The world outside disappeared. The gunfire, the alarms, the shouting, everything faded beneath the weight of those 6 words. The moment shattered as another blast rocked the mansion. Ceiling plaster rained onto the hardwood floor. One of Adriano's captains spoke urgently into his earpiece. They're inside the West Wing. Adriano immediately stepped between Evelyn and the hallway. His posture changed. Calm became lethal focus. Stay behind me. She wanted to argue. Instead, she found herself instinctively moving closer. Close enough to hear his steady breathing. Close enough to realize that, despite the chaos, his hands never trembled. Somewhere inside the smoke-filled mansion, a hidden figure watched security footage from a hacked surveillance feed. A gloved hand paused the image of Evelyn standing beside Adriano, then slowly zoomed in. A distorted voice whispered into a satellite phone, Phase 1 failed. A second voice answered, then begin Phase 2. What about Ashford? The reply came without hesitation. He has served his purpose. Kill them both. The call disconnected. Miles away, in the burning remains of his shattered reputation, Damien Ashford stared at the same order arriving on his encrypted phone. For the first time in years, he realized he was no longer the man pulling the strings. He had become expendable, and somewhere beyond the storm, an enemy even more powerful than either the billionaire or the mafia boss had entered the game. The first rays of dawn never reached the estate. Smoke hung over the forest like a heavy curtain, turning the morning sky into a muted gray. The attack had lasted less than 20 minutes, yet it had changed everything. Broken glass covered the marble entrance. Several black SUVs burned beyond the gates. The silence afterward felt almost louder than the gunfire itself. Evelyn stood in the grand foyer, wrapped in a borrowed coat, staring at the destruction. Only yesterday, she had been preparing to say, I do. Now she was standing inside the fortress of the most feared mafia boss in America, watching men quietly rebuild barricades. Nothing about her life still felt familiar. Adriano entered from the command room. His shoulder had been stitched by the estate's physician, but exhaustion showed in the faint shadows beneath his eyes. You should eat. Evelyn looked at him. You haven't slept. Neither have you. She crossed her arms. I don't want breakfast. I want answers. He nodded once. You've earned them. They walked into the library. The morning light filtered through towering windows, illuminating Richard Carter's leather folder, still resting on the oak table. Adriano opened a hidden compartment beneath it. Inside lay a small brass key. Evelyn frowned. My father hid this? Not here. Adriano picked it up carefully. I moved it after he died. What does it open? A safety deposit box. Where? Downtown Chicago. She looked up sharply. The evidence. He nodded. The last copy. Before either of them could continue, Marco, Adriano's longtime captain, hurried into the room. Boss. Adriano looked up. What is it? We intercepted encrypted communications. He placed a tablet on the table. The attack wasn't ordered by Ashford. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. Then who? Marco enlarged a photograph. An older man appeared on the screen. Silver hair, tailored suit, cold blue eyes. He is Victor Moretti. Adriano's expression hardened. The head of the Moretti syndicate. Marco nodded. He financed Ashford's entire business empire. Evelyn stared at the image. My father discovered them both. Yes, Adriano answered quietly. And Richard died before he could expose them. Hours later, the convoy entered downtown Chicago. For the first time since the wedding, Adriano insisted on traveling in an unmarked vehicle instead of his usual armored SUV. The fewer people who know we're coming, the better. Evelyn nodded. The city looked strangely normal. People walked to work. Traffic lights changed. Coffee shops opened. No one knew that beneath the ordinary rhythm of the city, powerful men were hunting one another. The safety deposit vault belonged to one of Chicago's oldest private banks. Its marble lobby echoed with quiet conversations and polished footsteps. Adriano wore a charcoal overcoat. Evelyn carried the brass key in trembling fingers. The bank manager greeted them politely. This way. Deep beneath the building, a steel vault door slowly swung open. Box 417. Evelyn inserted the key. The lock clicked. Inside rested a single envelope and an old VHS cassette. Nothing else. She carefully opened the envelope. A handwritten letter rested inside. It began with familiar words. My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, then someone finally kept their promise. Tears filled her eyes. Richard Carter's handwriting looked exactly as she remembered. The letter explained everything. Years earlier, Richard had uncovered proof that Damien Ashford's technology company was secretly transporting trafficked children through private shipping routes owned by Victor Moretti. Hundreds of innocent lives depended on exposing the network. Richard knew he would be killed. He also knew the evidence would make his daughter a target forever. So he made one impossible decision. He asked the only man powerful enough to protect her, Adriano De Luca. Not because he trusted the mafia, because he trusted one man. Halfway through the letter, Evelyn stopped reading. Her voice barely emerged. He never promised me to you. Adriano quietly shook his head. No. She looked at him. The contract was never a marriage contract. No, it was a guardianship agreement. She stared at him in disbelief. For 25 years, you let the world believe something else. Yes. Why? He answered without hesitation. Because if my enemies believed you were valuable to me, they would watch me. They wouldn't look for Richard's evidence. Realization washed over her. My father used me as bait. No. Adriano's voice softened. He trusted that I would never let the trap close. Suddenly, the bank lights flickered. Marco's voice came through Adriano's earpiece. Boss, we've been compromised. Gunfire erupted upstairs. Customers screamed. The bank manager collapsed behind the counter. Adriano instinctively stepped in front of Evelyn. "Stay behind me." She grabbed his sleeve. "I'm not leaving you." He looked at her. For the first time, there was no distance left between them, only trust. The attackers flooded the stairwell. Professional, disciplined, Moretti's elite security team. The narrow vault corridor erupted into chaos. Adriano's men returned fire with precise coordination. Marco pulled civilians toward an emergency exit. Evelyn noticed a frightened little boy hiding beneath a bench, separated from his mother. Without thinking, she ran toward him. "Evelyn," Adriano shouted. At that exact moment, a gunman turned toward her. Everything happened in seconds. The shot rang out. Adriano threw himself between them. The bullet struck his vest, knocking him backward against the steel vault door. He hit the floor hard. "Evelyn." She rushed to him, panic flooding her chest. "Adriano." He opened his eyes. "I'm all right." "You idiot." Tears streamed down her face. "You could have died." He smiled faintly, despite the pain. "I made your father a promise. I wasn't going to break it today." Police sirens surrounded the building within minutes. Victor Moretti's surviving men fled. Federal agents secured the evidence recovered from the vault. The VHS recording and financial records were enough to expose the trafficking network that Richard Carter had died trying to reveal. Within days, Damian Ashford was arrested on charges of conspiracy, money laundering, and human trafficking. Victor Moretti disappeared before authorities could capture him, becoming one of the most wanted fugitives in the country. Richard Carter's name was finally cleared. His work was recognized not as the obsession of a paranoid man, but as the courage of someone who had sacrificed everything to protect children he had never met. Several weeks later, the rain had finally stopped. Evelyn stood on the terrace of Adriano's estate, overlooking the forest. For the first time in years, the property felt peaceful. She heard footsteps behind her. Adriano joined her, his shoulder fully healed. Neither of them spoke immediately. The silence no longer felt awkward. It felt familiar. "I've been thinking," Evelyn said quietly. "About what?" "My father." She smiled softly. "He didn't choose my future. He chose someone he believed would give me one." Adriano looked toward the horizon. "I never expected you to stay." She turned to face him. "I'm not staying because of a promise." He looked at her. "I'm staying because somewhere between fear and trust, I found the man behind the legend." For the first time since Richard Carter had walked into his life 25 years earlier, Adriano De Luca truly smiled. Not the restrained expression of a mafia boss, not the mask feared by the underworld, just a man who had finally laid down the burden he had carried for decades. He gently took Evelyn's hand. This time, she didn't pull away. Above them, the storm clouds slowly parted. Sunlight spilled across the estate, illuminating a future neither of them had ever believed possible. The promise written in blood had not become a prison. It had become the bridge that carried two wounded souls toward a life they chose for themselves.